Hi, everyone. I'm Leah.
Hey, and I'm Ezra, and you're joining What's the Plan? And if you're joining this, you're part of a movement to stop fascism in America via a massive, broad-based, people-powered organizing effort because we're in the middle of an authoritarian takeover moment. And there are a lot of people out there we know who are going to tell you how terrible everything is, and they happen to be right, but that's not enough. We're trying to do something different here. We're trying to work through in real time, in discussion with each other, the best strategies for pushing back against MAGA everywhere we can with the tools at our disposal.
We do this together with you, the people who are organizing, getting active, and working in your communities, or maybe you're looking for that community. We know democracy is not a spectator sport. If we want to beat these fascist clowns, we all have to get on the field. There's no way out of this mess that does not require millions of us to get involved, stand up, and do our part. Also, we are married. We have been running Indivisible National together since we started it shortly after Donald Trump's election. We bring our experience as former congressional staffers and do-gooders advocates to this work, but we are not the leaders of this movement. There are thousands of local Indivisible groups all over the country that are led and operated by people like you. We've got a great discussion today. Ezra is going to go over new members of the movement. I'm going to touch base on election suppression moves of the last week. Ezra will cover the latest on ICE and the DHS funding fight in Congress and what we can do. And then, as usual, most of the time we'll go to your live questions. Ezra, tell us who is new to Indivisible this week.
Well, as per usual, y'all, there are too many new Indivisible groups from all around the country for me to list every single one of them because that would take up all of our time. But as we say every week, this is a movement that depends on new people coming in. If there were enough of us already, Donald Trump would not be in the White House. His goons would not be terrorizing our communities and murdering Americans in the streets. We wouldn't need to recruit and organize and train new leaders. But that's not the truth. The truth is we need to roll out the red carpet for brand new people who are coming to this movement now because they are welcome and they are needed and we want them actively organizing. So please, in the chat and with your emojis, welcome to, I picked 10 out of a hat of the dozens who formed new Indivisible groups. Thank you, Elaine with Calhoun County 5051. Love our sister groups with 5051. They are with Anniston, Alabama. Calhoun County 5051. Welcome to the movement. Tallulah with Indivisible Isla Vista, California, which is a new student group, Leah. We're getting more student groups forming around the country. Welcome, Tallulah. Thank you for registering the new Indivisible group. Randy, Indivisible Carlisle in Littleton, Colorado. Catherine with Mystic Area Indivisible in Mystic, Connecticut. I was like, is that real? And I looked it up. Mystic, Connecticut looks lovely. Very picturesque. Welcome to the movement, Catherine, and your Mystic Area Indivisibles. Leslie with Easton Indivisible in Easton, Maryland. Y'all, we had like 6 groups in Michigan join, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to name all of them. I, again, randomly picked Kayla with Pontiac Indivisible in Pontiac, Michigan, but we had another group in Sheboygan, another in Alger County, another in Waterford, another in St. Charles, something in the water in Michigan this week. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We need more Michigan Indivisibles. Pamela with Cut Bank in Cut Bank, Montana. Love that name, Cut Bank. Barbara with Indivisible Upper Cumberland in Cookeville, Tennessee. Joanna with Indivisible Ellis County in Midlothian, Texas. Christy with Woodinville, Indivisible Woodinville, Washington. And that's 10. Leah, you always let me do any that come in internationally. We had 3 international groups from all over the world, actually, interestingly enough. Haley registered Indivisible Netherlands in Amsterdam. Elizabeth registered Indivisible Perth in Perth, Australia. And Janet with Indivisible Munich in Munich, Germany. We're actually talking internally about how to do a better job linking Indivisible groups internationally together. So more to come on that, but welcome, welcome, welcome. We have folks pushing back against kings all over the world, and that's what we like to see. So welcome to the new folks. You are needed. We are going to win, and we're going to win because we're going to do this together. And welcome to our MAGA infiltrators who are listening to this podcast or who are watching the Zoom and posting fun little clips of me and Leah on your little neck of the internet. Hopefully you learned something here. We organize out in the open, and it's all here for you to see. So
yeah,
hope you learned something.
It is always so funny because they'll be like, discovered their secret organizing meeting. We're like, y'all, it's a podcast. This is not that secret. We're proud of what we do.
Leah, we're gonna get to questions in 5 to 10 minutes, but first you're going to talk to us about. There's been a lot of news around election subversion. Do you want to cover what's been happening in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that we're going to talk about this more in the questions, but we have seen a major set of escalations around Trump and MAGA threat to elections over the last week and a half, from the raid in Fulton County to Trump's call to nationalize elections to the reintroduction of the MEGA and SAVE Acts. Now, Republicans are very much trying to link the DHS fight into a proxy fight over voter ID and voter suppression. It can all seem a little overwhelming. I think it's very important that we understand this as part of a unified authoritarian strategy. Trump and Republicans are not idiots. They understand that voters have soured on their reign of chaos, cruelty, and corruption. They understand that in the upcoming midterms, they are on track to get walloped. They're extremely scared of what happens after they lose control of the House or the Senate and the oversight authority and the check that can present on their agenda. So they're in this very specific and dangerous place. They have not successfully fully consolidated power, and they also cannot afford to give it up. And so they've decided on this strategy. They are going to rig the rules. They are going to suppress voters. They are going to undermine confidence in elections. They are going to create the conditions in which they can try to steal the election. And they've been doing this already, right? Gerrymandering in Republican states last year, the big push around Texas, their preparation for the upcoming VRA decision where they are going to try to do another major push on gerrymandering. They've also made a pretty clear decision to escalate this campaign now in order to kind of shift the focus and try to turn this into a conversation about voter ID and voter standards across the country, as opposed to a conversation about the ICE reign of terror that is happening. So we've got to do three things. I'm going to ask folks to think about this in terms of three things in this movement. First, we are going to level set, okay? Because a really important part of our principle here is we do not give them power that they don't have. We do not help them claim powers they do not have. So I want everyone to hear the following sentence. They are losing, so they're going to try to steal the election. They're going to fail because we're going to stop them. And I just want you to do whatever it takes to really just like internalize that, right? Write it down, tattoo it on your arm, whatever. The first thing that is important with election sabotage campaigns is not allowing their hype and their projection of power to do the work for them and to suppress the vote on its own. We don't give them power they don't have. Elections are run by the states. That's not changing. We're going to push them back every step of the way. We're not giving them anything they don't have the power to do. Second thing we're going to do, we're going to be playing whack-a-mole all year to stop this stuff. Right now, that's going to mean calling our reps on the SAVE Act. We'll drop a toolkit in the chat. You can find it at indivisible.org. Just to repeat, they cannot pass the SAVE Act without getting it through the filibuster in the Senate. And that means that if we simply hold Democrats together, they're not going to be able to pass it. It's incredibly dangerous. It's scary. We got to keep the heat on our reps to oppose it. But if they do that, they're going to be stuck. Now, if you're in a state that's impacted by the VRA decision, it might mean we're calling you up soon to push back against more partisan and racist gerrymandering. Wherever you are, we're going to be on high alert all year for these kinds of shenanigans, these attempts to rig the rules or interfere with voting, and we're going to be pushing back. And then third, I want everyone to understand that when we recruit more people to our Indivisible group for local activities, when we have a No Kings event, when we build our non-cooperation and economic protest muscles, those are the capacities, the connections, and the power that we are going to need for a whole of movement push if and when they try to throw a Hail Mary and steal the election, okay? So everything that we are collectively doing right now is about building the muscles that we will eventually need if we actually have to collectively come together and ensure that the results of the election are respected. So understand everything that we're collectively doing in that framework, because we certainly are. All right. Now, Ezra, can you tell us a little bit about the current major legislative fight, though?
There are so many current major legislative fights, but the DHS funding fight is taking up a lot of our brain space over the last week, and it's going to take up a lot of our brain space over the next week. Last week, we were talking about this, too, when we had Erica Chenoweth on our call. And what we said last week was we were headed towards a shutdown. The whole government was going to shut down. And there were a couple of possible ways this was going to go. One, Republicans could cave and give into Democratic demands of actually holding ICE accountable and CBP accountable and DHS accountable. Or the Democrats were going to cave and they were going to give Republicans more time for basically nothing. It turns out we didn't have to choose, folks. We got both. We got both. The Dems succeeded in splitting up the bills. That did happen. So there is no longer a risk of an all-government shutdown on the table. They are split up. The only thing that did not get permanently funded for the whole year is DHS. and Dems gave away 2 weeks for DHS. There were no constraints on DHS. They said, okay, another 2 weeks to give us time to negotiate. Now, I don't think DHS should get another dollar of funding anytime based on what they are doing in this country. But that was the deal that was struck. And DHS now has funding until February 13th. So that's next Friday. What are the demands going to be then? That's where the question turns. Did they just give 2 weeks away for nothing, or are Dems going to demand something? And I will say, this week, Senate and House Democratic leadership came out with a pretty darn good list of demands. I'm surprised. Let me give you a couple of things that are in it. Stopping ICE and CBP from just roaming around hospitals and churches and schools and other sensitive locations. Ending Kavanaugh stops and racial profiling. Making sure that ICE and CBP can't enter private residences and homes without a warrant. It's also some of the demands that I'm seeing in here are responsive to some of the criticism we have given them and others in the immigrant rights space have given them. For instance, there's a body cam mandate, but explicitly within the body cam mandate, they say this cannot be used to create a database of protesters. It's got to only be used for accountability. That's good. That's an improvement. It responds to what folks have been asking for. In addition to all this, it says we want ICE out of Minnesota and we want accountability and firing of Nome. All of this is good stuff, y'all. And frankly, significantly stronger than what we've seen out of Democrats to date. A couple questions remain. One, what does this actually mean in terms of legislative language, in terms of the details? Because it really does matter whether there's the soft, weak, unenforceable version of these demands, or they're actually hard demands that are going to constrain DHS and the regime. And the second thing that's not in this proposal is funding. We don't know where they're drawing the line on funding. What should be happening right now is the Democrats should be clawing back the big ugly bill funding. I mean, DHS has more money than the Ukrainian military, as we've covered before. It has more money than any other federal law enforcement agency in the country. In fact, all of them combined. They've got far too much money. We should be clawing it back. There shouldn't be any money in a full year funding bill. There shouldn't be any more 2-week CR money. If the Republicans want to shut down the government next Friday in order to continue funding a lawless agency that is deeply unpopular, that is terrorizing communities and murdering Americans, that's on them, and we will hammer them for it. What Democrats should not do is give another dollar for it. So I want to give y'all an optimist take for interpreting this and a cynic's take for interpreting this, because I've seen both and I feel both. And I want to walk us through how we can digest this, because I care most about what we do with this new information. The optimist take goes something like this. These are pretty good demands. This is way better than what we thought we were getting from Democrats. As of 2 weeks ago, Hakeem Jeffries wasn't even whipping on DHS at all. There were no demands at all. So to not only have demands, but have them be concrete, have them be informed by immigrant rights experts, by the grassroots, that's a massive shift, and we should back this play. We should trumpet it, and we should celebrate the Dems who are fighting right now. I think that is the optimist take, that Republicans are in a weak position, Democrats are on offense. That's what we've been clamoring for literally 14 months. Good, let's do it. Let's win. And half of my heart is there. Now, the cynic's take is this. The cynic's take goes something like, sure, Dems put some demands down on paper, and that's worth as much as the paper it's printed on. They don't actually intend to fight for this. They gave away 2 weeks to Republicans, and that 2 weeks allows temperatures to cool so that when ultimately the Democrats surrender, as they've done time and time again, the blowback will be less because the temperatures won't be as high. And I want to be clear, over the last 14 months, when you've been presented with an optimist take for Senate Democratic behavior and a cynic's take for Senate Democratic behavior, every single one of us who said, I think the optimists have it right, we look like suckers. I haven't taken the optimist take very much, but anytime I have, it's like, nope, Lucy with the football again. They've screwed us again. I mean, this goes back literally 14 months. They passed the Lake and Riley bill to empower ICE. They passed a crypto bribe bill. They appointed countless lifetime judges and these bonkers unhinged cabinet members. They passed a sense of Congress 7 months ago, congratulating and thanking ICE for its service. So look, I think we have been plenty critical of Senate and House Democratic leadership. And here's my message to everybody here. You can have the optimist take, you can have the cynic's take, and it doesn't matter, because our takeaway in this moment for what we do is the same, which is, one, we should be pressing Senate Democrats to refuse one additional dollar for DHS between now and next Friday. 2, we should be pressing them to not water down their demands and cheerleading them if they are fighting for it. And 3, we should be supporting primary candidates in the House and the Senate who are aggressively and loudly talking about tearing DHS down and starting entirely over, not just calling for squishy reforms. You can be a cynic, you can be an optimist. Those are still the right moves. And I want to be clear, some of this is happening in the House because Hakeem Jeffries feels vulnerable now because he screwed the pooch 2 weeks ago and refused to actually whip the vote. That's good that he feels like he needs to make up for that now. He should be unifying his caucus now. But the big vote's going to happen in the Senate. So the House is useful to us insofar as they are not giving any wiggle room to the Senate. But ultimately, this is going to come down to how your senator votes. So if you feel squishy on the issue, if you need more details, that's cool. You don't need to be an immigration expert to make your opinion heard on this. You can go to indivisible.org. We got scripts. We got briefs. The number one thing, if you take away nothing else, do not let up pressure. This is a live fight, and the outcome of this fight is going to be determined by how much the Democrats feel like we have their backs and how much they feel like there will be blowback if they surrender again. Okay, Leah, anything I missed on that?
No, that's great. Let's go to the questions.
Okay, that's overall the state of play. Now is the time for questions. Let's switch on over. As a reminder, if you vote on the questions, you are more likely to have a question that you want to hear answered. If you are listening to the podcast, you've got to come to the Zoom in order to submit or vote on a question. Otherwise, we take these in order of top votes to lowest. This is lowercase d democratic. That's what this looks like. And you can ask critical questions or supportive questions or random questions, but we answer the questions that are voted on. So the first one comes from Peter Warren in Indivisible, San Pedro, California. Peter says, we are calling our MOCs, that's members of Congress, with the demand that they get tough in the negotiations over funding for Homeland Security. We know that Trump wants to use ICE and other law enforcement agencies in Homeland Security to police voting and election places this fall. Steve Bannon said that directly. This is my editorial. So yes, we know that. Can you please endorse a request that demands a ban on funds being spent to interfere with, oversee, monitor, or any way engage in election security? This seems a threshold request to ensure free and fair elections. Leah, what do you think about that and like the overall fight right now?
It's a great question. So one thing that I think is worth naming, when Ezra talked about sensitive locations, so a ban on ICE activity outside of sensitive locations, there's a live fight around including polling places there. Democrats have included it so far. Republicans are trying to make this, they're immediately trying to then turn this into a demagoguery thing about, who's allowed to vote, et cetera, et cetera. We got to really hold firm there. This is about people being able to exercise their basic civic responsibilities without fear of violence from an unaccountable, out of control police force that is operating at the whims of Donald Trump. So I think that's already in there. In terms of specific parameters around broader election interference, it's a great question, and I know it's a live conversation. So stay tuned for updates, but totally hear you on the concerns about using this as a moment to broadly put as many constraints as possible on DHS's ability to interfere with the election. I do think it's also just worth saying really clearly an overarching political analysis, which is that the way that what happens in Minnesota is going to determine what they think is politically possible in terms of deploying DHS, ICE, CBP to interfere with the polls. Right now, what we are seeing in Minnesota is that if you were hoping to shape electoral outcomes in a Republican's favor in Minnesota by deploying ICE and CBP, that has backfired in the most extraordinary way possible. And so it's really important that, first of all, they actually have to draw down and leave Minnesota, that they do not have the ability to claim any victory, and that they come away from that with the impression that deploying these occupying armies actually generates extraordinary levels of community backlash and resolve to do the activities that they are trying to stop, right? So what we want is for them to come away from this entire experience with the impression that if they send people out into towards a polling location, they're going to get twice as many determined voters showing up.
Hear, 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 hear. Okay, Carol asks, we need trainings for when ICE shows up at our voting stations. Is Indivisible planning to offer these trainings nationally? One thing I will note, we had more than 200,000 people join the No Kings Coalition Eyes on ICE training in the 2 days after Alex Preddy's murder. More than 200,000 people joined that. If you haven't seen it, we recorded it. You can go and find it. But if you want to watch a live Eyes on ICE training, you can do that tonight. tonight. We are offering another one. There will be another one in a week or two. So yes, we are thinking about how can we offer as much training as possible to people on the ground so that they know how to confront ICE and stand up for their constitutional rights in a way that is legally protected. I can't recommend highly enough this training. This is not a rah kind of, we're going to beat them in the end kind of training. This is a nuts and bolts training led by ACLU, informed by constitutional lawyers to tell you, okay, ICE is giving you orders that are violating your First Amendment rights. What do you do in that situation? So people can prepare themselves. Right now, that's not specifically focused on elections. It's going to have to shift into addressing that specific concern. So, Carol, good question. Yes, it's on our mind. And yes, this is going to be a theme of what Indivisible and the No Kings Coalition is offering all this year. Leah, anything else on that? Okay. Cosmo, here is another limitation to place on ICE funding. Failure to obey any court order will immediately terminate all funding for ICE and the Border Patrol. Without this, there's no accountability for other restrictions. ICE violated nearly 100 court orders in the month of January alone. This was proposed by Robert Reich, big fan of him. What do you think? That's Cosmo with Indivisible Olympia. Leah, you want me? Okay. Here's one critique, can I say, one critique of the Democratic list of demands goes something like this. They're not going to follow the law. Are you crazy? That's one of the critiques I've heard, which I think is what you're saying here, Cosmo. And I think there's a lot to that. Nobody here, not me, not Leah, not anybody who is paying attention, believes that if we pass a law telling ICE not to do something, they'll say, oh, okay, we're not going to do that. We wouldn't want to violate the law. They are flagrantly violating the Constitution and breaking the law every damn day. This is everybody from the ICE agents themselves all the way up to the top. So I want to be clear. We are not under the impression that you pass a law and everything's hunky-dory and we're fine. I assume the ICE agents, their bosses, all the way up to Nome and Trump are going to break the law, are going to do everything they can to subvert the law. The question is, what tools are we giving to individuals, localities, states, and the courts to hold DHS accountable? When we pass federal law, we can either give those folks tools or we cannot give those folks tools. And as we're constructing legislation to constrain DHS, none of us should be under the assumption that let's put some laws on paper, let's put some rules and deliver it to them nicely, and that solves the problem. That clearly will not solve the problem. So this specific question, just terminating all funding for ICE and Border Patrol, I think this is in line with what I would want to see, which is where's the teeth? Where are the teeth of this legislation? Because if it is just an expression of our values and not an expression of the force behind those values, it's worthless to me.
Amen.
Okay. Anonymous attendee asks, a Republican rhetoric on immigration is increasingly focused on, one, ICE is only going after violent criminals, and two, all that is needed for law enforcement to cooperate with ICE, all that is needed, and two, all that is needed is for law enforcement to cooperate with ICE. Of course, neither of these are true, but they resonate with Trump's base. It's important to counter the rhetoric, and if so, what is the most effective way of doing so? Leah?
So I would first take issue with a little bit of an assumption here, which is that when we're countering the rhetoric, we're playing for Trump's base. I think we're all pretty realistic about the fact that there's a decent portion of Trump's base that is kind of fully down the right-wing rabbit hole in terms of the news they consume, the information they've got. We're generally not playing for those folks. What we are playing for are people who are not ideologically locked into the right-wing, hate machine, but who might not even be paying that much attention at all, might not have very firm opinions about what's going on, might be ideologically cross-pressured. And what we want them to feel is, what the hell is going on here, right? Why are people being shot in the streets? Why are children being kidnapped on their way to school? Why are parents being taken after dropping their kids off at daycare? Why are they even in Minnesota in the first place when literally everyone in Minnesota is making abundantly clear they don't want them there? Those are the kinds of places that we want to dig in, because those are both values-based and they are about activating a sense of shared emotions and a sense of shared story about what's happening, that we can win, and where we can make a lot of inroads with people who are not totally captured by the MAGA hate machine. Now, I think one of the things that's incredibly important and that has been incredibly powerful about the last month, and that gives us the foundation for that messaging and framework, has been the wholesale society-wide activation in Minnesota. And we've talked to a lot of folks. We've talked to our folks on the ground in Minnesota. We've talked to other members of the coalition. What people will say universally is, it's partisan in the sense that Donald Trump is doing this and that he's doing it for his own political goals. But what he has activated in Minnesota is something that goes beyond partisanship. It's just a deep sense of trying to protect your neighbors, trying to be there as part of a community, trying to be there for each other. And I think we've got to tap into that consistently and ask people, ask people to understand that this is not an argument about, the enforcement system. This is an argument about whether we're going to have an out of control, lawless, secret police going after our neighbors or not.
And I'd argue that that's why they're getting crushed repeatedly in every election that has been happening for more or less the last 14 months, is because what we are seeing is not suddenly everybody loves the Democratic Party or would consider them a Democrat or wishes they had voted for Kamala Harris. What we're seeing is something that supersedes just political divides, that it is people just don't want cruelty in their community. They don't want to see their neighbors abducted. They don't want to see their neighbors who are standing up for their neighbors murdered. And leaning into that is how we build like a super majority. It's not how we eke out a little win. It's how we actually create massive political change, because it's more than political. Something to replicate in other communities over the course of this year. Okay, Jeff asks, and this is related, Leah, but maybe you have something to add. How is Indivisible preparing for the possibility that President Trump could try to federalize or otherwise interfere with state-run elections? And what role do you envision for the grassroots groups in mounting an effective public response to stopping such abuses of power? Leah, I'm going to ask you, you had something that you wanted everybody to tattoo on their arm.
Yes.
And I would recommend you say again, what is it that we should be tattooing on our arms and saying repeatedly over and over again all year as we hear news that maybe Trump is going to cancel the election or take over the election?
They are losing, so they're going to try to steal the election. They're going to fail because we are going to stop them. It's really, really, really important that we collectively are level setting about whether they have the authority to federalize or interfere with these state-run elections, because there are going to be pushes by the Trump administration. We can predict some of them. We can't predict all of them. What we know is that there's going to be a legal fight in a moment like that. There's going to be a public opinion fight in a moment like that. And there's going to be mass mobilization and popular pushback in a moment like that. What we know is that it is possible to generate the kinds of overwhelming levels of opposition across society, not just us in the streets, but enormous amounts of popular opposition that do force them to back down on something. And what we know is we're going to have to do it in those moments. And also, we have a lot of evidence that efforts to steal elections do in fact have the potential to activate mass popular pushback in society. So again, I would say it's important to understand everything that you are collectively doing when you are organizing for No Kings, when you are recruiting new people in your community, when you are participating in a boycott. Each of those things are the muscles that we are collectively building to generate the popular response that will allow the lawyers to prevail in that moment.
I liked Mary's comment, which was that's too much tattoo. That is a long tattoo.
Small print? I don't know.
Is the short version of this, they don't have that power.
They don't have that power. They don't have that power. We're not going to give them that power.
Lynn asks, again, related, is there any plan to emphasize election integrity messaging, something catchy signage, calling, letter writing within the No Kings Coalition leading up to the midterms in order to raise awareness about the administration's actions to undermine election confidence, which has already begun with the seizing of ballots in Fulton County, as well as the obvious intention to post ICE at key polling locations? We can expect and need to be ready. So, how does No Kings, as this big grand coalition, prepare for this eventuality?
Well, I would say this is an incredibly live conversation within No Kings, and there is very wide agreement that we will collectively, as the pro-democracy, anti-authoritarian coalition in this country that's showing up in very large numbers, we've got a voice that's really important for helping people understand what is happening right now, for helping people understand, again, that they're going to try to steal the election, but that we're going to stop them. So I cannot tell you exactly how that's going to manifest in this immediate March No Kings because the plans are being worked out right now. But I can say this is going to be a major theme of everything that we do all year.
I just realized I'm normally not wearing a short sleeve shirt, but you're welcome to also get an Indivisible tattoo to match me if you would like. If you do, let me know. That would be kind of funny. Okay, Eileen asks, I'm concerned that we are not making enough noise about the SAVE Act. Republicans are trying to get it put in with ICE demands. This act will put our information on a national database and set us up for a Trump takeover. Leah, you mentioned SAVE Act a bit earlier on. Mm-hmm. Can you just set everybody up to the same basic knowledge of what is the SAVE Act and how much should we worry about the substance of it, and then how much should we worry about it actually becoming law?
So the thing you need to know about the SAVE Act is that it is ostensibly and is framed as some kind of election integrity legislation, and it's actually functionally just designed to institute a bunch of different restrictions that make it much harder for lots of people to vote. I think the most well-known of those is potentially making it very hard for married women who have changed their names to successfully vote if they do not have updated identification. But there's a bunch of other potentially dangerous restrictions in there as well. So substantively, yes, this is very bad. I do want to level set. We have successfully held together most of the Democratic Party, almost everyone in the Democratic Party, with a couple of very important exceptions in the House. We've mostly held Ed Case from Hawaii, who represents a very blue district and who should be ashamed of himself, right? We've mostly held together Democrats. This is legislation that requires a passage via regular order, which means that it is vulnerable to the filibuster. So as long as we hold Democrats together and we're able to consistently have them threaten the filibuster, we're going to be able to hold out against this. Now, I think that's not a reason to not continue the pressure, but I do think that it is important to it's important to understand the difference between something like a funding bill, which is must pass. It's some version of the funding bill is going to pass, and the question is whether it cuts funding for DHS, for ICE, for CBP, whether it institutes real restrictions that help to mitigate harm or not, versus something that can be filibustered.
Yep. Good question. Nina, people are asking, is it Ed Case or Head Case? His name is Ed Case. His name is Ed Case.
That's
the ads write themselves. Okay, Nina says Trump is in his beyond explosive rage phase. It's a long phase. Short of starting another war for Trump's quote-unquote popularity, do you see the nationwide protests, Congress, the courts, or the potential for him to be impeached or 25th Amendment as a means to slow his devious ways? The polls say he is at his lowest, but he and his henchmen, deplorable Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, Tulsi Gabbard, Stephen Bannon, out there agitating for him, and they're not stopping, just changing their messaging ever so slightly. Can I say one? We covered this a bit with Erica Chenoweth, this expert in social movements and authoritarianism, last week. But I want to be clear: we are living under an authoritarian breakthrough moment, and when you are living under an authoritarian regime, you feel like shit just about every day because they are never going to admit they don't have power. They are never going to admit they are not weakened. They are never going to de-escalate. That is not how authoritarians work. So if you are a passive observer to the American political context, you could look at the last 14 months and say, what the fuck? All this activism, and yet Trump is, if anything, escalating right now. Is he weakened at all? And I want to be clear, he is undeniably weakened from where he was 14 months ago. And that's not because of elites in business or in law firms or in media or in universities. It's because of the work y'all did. The people on this call, the people who've been organizing in the Twin Cities and LA and Chicago and in the hinterlands and the red states and the rural areas, who put on 3 of the 5 largest protests in American history and delivered the best election outcomes that we have seen in a decade. That is why he is weakened. That is why his poll numbers are in the trash and why his coalition in Congress is fracturing. And also, a weakened authoritarian is going to lash out and is in many ways more dangerous than an authoritarian who is just secure in his power. So you are right. He is doing a lot of bad things. The way to stop him, the only way to stop him, is to organize mass, nonviolent, people-powered defiance. That is how we both protect our communities now and prevent him from stealing the election in November, and then ensure that the Democratic Party goes on offense and holds every one of his goons accountable starting on January 3rd of 2027.
I just really want to underscore the point about weakened does not mean less dangerous.
Yes.
Because our analysis is that part of the reason why we are seeing this crazy rapid cycle of incredibly violent and dangerous lashing out, right? The attacks on Venezuela, the threats against Greenland, the escalation and occupation of Minnesota, all of the threats around national elections is because he understands that he's lost some political capital and he's now in the stage where he's testing for different ways to regain the front foot. So I think it's not necessarily correct to say, whoa, are we getting anywhere because he's still doing these things? Actually, part of what's happening is that he's gotten weaker and now he's trying really hard to find a way to get back in command.
So we organize and we beat him, and he's going to lose. He's going to go down, but we got to organize to beat him. So what can we do? Make No Kings 3 on March 28th, the largest protest in the history of this country. That's what we got to do. We did 3 million people in April of last year, 5 million people of June of last year, 7 million people of October of last year. Make it bigger. That's on all of us to do. And we're going to do it. Anonymous attendee asks, last year I was disappointed when the Democrats' reaction to the State of the Union was so weak. What can we ask our representatives and senators to do differently this year, February 24th, especially in light of the growing resistance in the country? This is a great question. Thanks for bringing back a sore spot for us, because we tried to avert that and we tried to encourage more activity. And here's what I will say. Democratic and Senate leadership of the Democratic caucuses actively organized against any kind of show of force. And the one representative who stood up bravely and stood up against Trump in the middle then got votes in the Democratic caucus in the House to censure him. So what I will say is that's not the political environment anymore. That is not where we're anymore. As of February of last year, they were condescendingly telling the opposition in the grassroots to fuck off. They were telling us we were not the future. We needed to go home. They weren't going to listen to us. They were going to work with Trump. That's not where they are now. I would expect a lot more action for the State of the Union.
I think that's right. I am honor bound to stick up for the people who smuggled the signs in last time around. Look, I understand the internet had a field day making fun of the little signs that had been smuggled in to oppose Donald Trump. I think it's really important that we collectively understand that those were the only folks who were actually trying to do anything, and they were doing it expressly without the support of leadership in that moment. So, not every political stunt is going to land. I think everybody involved is heartily aware that one did not have the effect that was desired, and also, man, things were really rough this time last year. There was such discouragement of any kind of show of visible opposition. And so I want us to a little bit grade on a curve as we look back into that moment and at the tiny sign carriers. No,
point taken. I think that's right. It did not meet the moment, and also it was the result of active opposition from more powerful forces, and they were trying what they could, and we should give grace to people who throw things at a wall, and sometimes what you throw at a wall doesn't stick. Also, this year, I think either you got two options. Either you don't go and you do something outside, or when you go, you make a big stink in some way. You do not just cede Trump the stage and treat this as politics as usual. Trust, we don't have anything to announce now, but we're talking with a few national partners. There's going to be more. Stay tuned. Michelle asks, idea, the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, could be used as a tool of resistance. Widespread anxiety and depression caused by an increasingly fascist and violent state are real conditions that may legally qualify workers for FMLA leave. If so, might a coordinated mass FMLA campaign be feasible? Collective FMLA leave could offer job protection and healthcare access while helping sustain a broader general strike. It would be even more effective here in Minnesota because we now have paid family and medical leave program. Leah, I'm going to say something else, and then I want you to comment on this specifically. Okay. I was just on a call last weekend with Mayday Coalition, and it was a call with these luminaries from across the ecosystem on how do you actually build for a general strike. And a lot of the call was reflecting on the successes of the Twin Cities and what we need to do collectively, nationally, to do that everywhere. And what I want to have everybody put on their calendar right now as we build towards No Kings on March 28th, is May Day, May 1st of this year. So a few weeks after No King's Day, because I think that is going to be an opportunity for us to do what Leah's just been talking about, build that muscle, build that capability in our movement to actually strike. And there is there might be a way then, Leah, to feed in advantages some of us have depending on which state we live in if we've got FMLA access to.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and one of the challenges of these calls is that people propose totally new and novel ideas, and my reaction is kind of like, I would want to talk to some lawyers about that, and that's not a very satisfying reaction for a live Q&A, but I'd want to talk to some lawyers about that. It's a really interesting idea. It is a really interesting idea.
I think we've told this story before, but maybe not in the podcast, where there's sometime in Indivisible's history, we were all posting to our group chat, and somebody proposed a tactic, and Leah and I both typed a response. We were in different rooms. We typed a response and sent it at the exact same time. And Leah's message was, maybe, but let's run the traps on that. And my response was, fuck it, let's do it and be legends. And what I will say is, you can't have all of one of those types of people. You need both types of people to make sure that you're able to build things together. So I do appreciate that. That caution is necessary for us to move together effectively.
But between the two of us, we have one reasonable approach to risk.
That's right. It balances out. Okay. Thanks for the question, though, Michelle. I love the creativity. Susan, co-leader of Do Something Indivisible in South Coast, New England. That's funny because I went to Do Something Indivisible also in Virginia for the Ice Out for Good protest, so I love the name. How to handle meeting disruptors. There is some counter-activism social media targeting our mutual aid group that meets at a local library. They make noise that they'll be, quote, coming for us at our next meeting on Monday at the library. We have trained safety marshals and de-escalation folks on hand. We see it as a teaching moment. We are hoping that the library doesn't cancel our use of the room because of the potential disruption from others. We also hope this can be a teaching moment. If they do show up, we'll be able to offer brownies and tea while we talk about gardening and food drives. Any suggestions on other ways to handle or prepare? Susan, I really do love your response. It does remind me a little bit of the Austin Indivisible groups when Greg Abbott, the governor, said he was calling out the National Guard on No Kings 2 there. And they said, well, okay, the Guard members are welcome to see our bands and our signs and our dancing if they'd like. And that's exactly what happened. I think not feeding the conflict as if this is some grand collision of differing ideologies, but y'all are exercising your First Amendment rights and trying to show up for your neighbors. And that's normal. And people who disrupt that are deeply weird and not normal.
I think that's better. I mean, look, it sounds like you've got a thoughtful plan. It sounds like people are prepared in advance. It sounds like you've discussed how you're going to handle it in advance. I think most of the challenges people have are not doing that planning first, so that everyone is just trying to come up with and improvise a response in real time.
Nia's got a question. In the last few days, several YouTube Substack hosts I follow and trust have been suggesting various quote-unquote surefire things needed to implement to resist the authoritarian takeover we find ourselves in. Cliff Cash, an activist comedian who normally supports the Indivisible movement, is now saying no more No Kings one-day protests and is suggesting an event on February 17th. We've got Park Rose Permaculture, Scott Galloway, and UNFTR suggesting general strikes as done in France. Or organized by the Democratic Heroes similar to MLK Jr. and or 1 month big tech boycotts. And finally, an ex-Black Panther on YouTube and Substack is professing we save America using under-the-radar organizing focused on standards and holding institutions accountable at the same time when we were being bombarded by daily disinformation and myriad new articles of the right's fresh horror. I don't see how we on the left can organize effectively if and unless we are coordinated in a movement. Really appreciate this question because it's about basically we are saying we've got to move in historic numbers. And how do we do that when there are a lot of different tactical and strategic ideas in this moment, many with value and with strategic sense? Leah?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is I think the moment we're in is more jazz than symphony, right? I think that we are going to collectively need to do a lot of different things that will work together and that will reinforce each other rather than saying there's going to be one top-down command and control operation. They're going to outline the strategy and we're all going to do the following things.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands? Jazz hands. Okay. Because it's just not going to happen that way. What we're looking for is a massive national tapestry of resistance and defiance and opposition. It will look different in different places. Different institutions require different kinds of pressure. Some of them, external public pressure, some of them internal organizing. Like different members of Congress require different things. We think of the strategy as not any single surefire tactic that's going to get us to where we need to go, but as a bunch of collective efforts that are going to ladder on and build on each other. And so, when somebody says, oh, well, No Kings is just a day of protest, I mean, it is if you only view it that way. And also, when we build a No Kings, we're doing training in advance, we're building skills in advance, we're building coalitions, we're absorbing new people into the movement, and then we're putting them to work on stuff like mutual aid, on stuff like Ice Watch, on stuff like ongoing congressional advocacy. When we do something like an economic boycott, right? When we do something like a Spotify or a Disney, we are collectively exerting our leverage, but we're also flexing a muscle that we can use in other ways in the future. So I would say that anybody who says, there's going to be one surefire way that we're going to fix this, and that's the whole ball game, and doesn't think about the ways in which you actually build collectively more muscles and more varied and diversified tactics, I think that's imposing a desire for control over something that's actually got to be more organic and bottom up.
I thought that was perfect. I don't have anything to add, and I always have something to add. That was great. Todd asks, East Valley Indivisibles, how do we keep ICE away from the polls? Did the Dems try to get that in the latest package? I think we've covered this pretty at length at this point. So good thing to worry about. We should worry about it. We should be focusing about it in our own training and in our pressure with elected officials. It's part of the plan. Linda asks, how can Indivisible support the boycott of ChatGPT? OpenAI is one of the regime's biggest funders. The quitgpt.org campaign has so much potential to send a message. What can our chapters do to help? From Linda at Indivisible at Palo Alto Plus. So we've seen this. We have not moved as a big campaign activity on this, but I am in favor of economic pressures like this, looking for where the regime is relying on corporate actors and the corporate actors are willingly giving their support. So this was Disney when they tried to push off Kimmel. This is Avelo Airlines helping the deportation regime. This is Spotify running ads to recruit for ICE. This relates to the question that we just got, but I think No Kings is incredibly important because of its scale, because of how it rolls out the red carpet for brand new people who have never been here before. It busts the bubble of inevitability and invincibility from the regime. And also, ultimately, where we're headed is a regime that tries to steal the election because they don't like the results, or they try to in some way interfere with the election because they don't like what's coming at them. And what we're going to need in that moment is more than just a one-day protest. We're going to have to marry the breadth of the national organizing we've done with No Kings with the depth of the organizing that we've seen in a place like the Twin Cities. And that looks like much more than showing up in a protest. It looks like using every tool available to you. One of those biggest tools is economic pressure. So that's a big way of saying broadly, I'm in favor of ChatGPT. I would say is the worst of the LLMs in terms of who they work with and who's in their leadership and how cozy they are with the regime. I think they are vulnerable to pressure too because they're in an active fight for market share. So what I would recommend to people on this call, like Linda said, check out quitgpt.org. We're currently evaluating whether this is a campaign we could take up too or how we can plug in best. But the best way to build momentum is to start building momentum.
That's right. I will also just reiterate, because I'm always the one who has to offer the caveats in these conversations. The reality is that there are simply more corporations who are doing extraordinarily harmful regime enabling things than we have the ability to sustain targeted boycotts of each one. And so we're trying to make strategic choices about when we go in. We're trying to test and see what we learn each time we do something like a Spotify or a Disney, or, and as many folks here were very involved in the Avelo Airlines campaign of last year. So we continue to be really eager to use that economic muscle, but we want to be careful about which campaigns we ask everyone to throw in on at the same time.
Great. Sarah Nelson asks, how do we reach those who are upset but not quote unquote plugged in? How do we create an onboarding process that creates a resilient community and supports people in finding and joining that community? Sarah, you're speaking our language.
That's what we do.
This is what we do. And so I'd say a couple of things. One thing we need to recognize. So you're listening to this podcast, you're on this call on a Thursday afternoon talking about what can we do to save democracy? And you got to start by recognizing that's not how most Americans live their lives. They are not nearly as obsessed with the ins and outs of political reform and what the regime is doing as all of us on here. And also, we have a responsibility to welcome them in, to create a space for them, not just to sign some letter or petition, or not just to donate money, but to be an active participant. So the best, we should recognize most of the time, most people are not paying attention. Every once in a while, something happens. It can be a very bad thing or it could be a very good thing, but something breaks through the noise, and some number of people in your life who were not political before will say, what the hell? I can't believe X just happened. I can't believe they just murdered that woman. I can't believe they just murdered that man. I can't believe what they're doing to the Twin Cities, what they're doing to Chicago, what they're doing to LA. I can't believe why they shut down the government, why my health insurance is going up. Whatever it is, some event happens and some number of people lift their heads up. And the question is, do you get your hooks into them in that moment? Do you say, yeah, that is fucked up. We should do something about it. Here's what I'm doing. And this gets to the next point. This is why we so strongly believe in the power of group-based organizing. I could tell you, send them to indivisible.org and get them on our email list. That's fine. Look, I like our email list. I think we send a lot of important information out. But if I could wave a wand, the first thing I would have people do is find their local organizing community. And I hope that's a local Indivisible group, but it could be a local 5051 chapter, or it could be a WFP chapter, or a different local organizing home. But if you aren't plugged into your local organizing community, if there isn't a next weekly or monthly meeting that you can say, hey, you should come check this out, it's going to be hard for you to get them in and actually get them organizing. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll let Leah jump in. This is another reason why No Kings is so important. It is not intended to be for the hardcore activists only. It is very intentionally constructed to be a come one, come all, and not just do it because you think you should do it, but do it because it's fucking fun. There's music and dancing and funny signs, and people bring their cats and their dogs, and they dance.
They bring their cats?
I saw somebody with their cat. The people bring cats on leash. Our cat would murder us.
It goes so badly.
He's giving me the stink eye right now, actually. No, but we want to create a sense of FOMO where people want to be part of it. And that's true for No Kings, and it's true for your groups. This is how we build an actual people-powered movement that grows.
I want to actually answer the question about onboarding.
Okay, great. Yeah. You want to answer the question suddenly.
I'm gonna try to respond to the question itself in my answer here, and just say, I'm assuming for the purposes of this that you're talking about running an ongoing Indivisible group and onboarding new people as they come in. And I think there's a lot of resources that we have available that we encourage you to check out. But I really think the very first thing that I would emphasize is making sure that when a new person shows up to a meeting, whether it's Zoom or in person, that person gets personally greeted by somebody who is going to notice if they come back, right? That there's no risk of them coming, sitting down in the back, leaving without having talked to anybody and without having taken any assignments and saying, that was okay, fine, whatever, I don't need to go back to that. You want to actually have some sense of personal connection and some sense that by virtue of coming here, they are getting plugged into an ongoing community that wants and needs and welcomes them. And so whether that's having somebody at the door who's like, hi, are you new? And who's actually regularly making sure that new people get connected with a buddy, whether that's having somebody who's going to follow up after the meeting and call and say, hey, I heard you went to, et cetera. Do you want to get coffee? Can we talk about what you're interested in? How do we plug you in? The jump between having somebody be an anonymous person in the back of the room to somebody who has a name, knows somebody at the meeting, has a job, or has been assigned to a committee, or just generally feels like they need to be part of this on an ongoing basis, that's a huge jump for the onboarding process.
And on that note, at events too. So whether it's ISAF for Good or it's No Kings, here's something I hate to see it every time I see it. Massive crowd of people show up for a rapid response event or some bigger planned event. You see new people who've never been before, but they wanted to check it out. They're there. And there's nobody in the crowd collecting email addresses or cell phone numbers or contact information in order to recruit people or telling people, hey, check out our local Indivisible website. We've got a meeting coming up. You should use these as recruitment opportunities to get people into your local groups. Because if they go to a protest and then they leave the protest, that's not success, actually. That's a good day. That's not full success, though. Real success is getting them in and helping them find their community. And as Leah said, there are ways to do that in the groups as well.
If I can also just jump off of that, because
please.
I think this is actually a really important piece of the No Kings value add. There's using it to recruit for your own group, and there's also using it to build deeper and more meaningful local coalitions. So one thing that I have heard from folks like Indivisible Austin is that they use this as a moment where they asked other activist hubs, other grassroots organizations, civil rights organizations, immigrant rights organizations, hey, come table with us. We want to make sure that as many people as possible hear about your mission and how to get involved at this No Kings event. That is a great opportunity to relationship build, to be asking people to be in more deeper partnership, and to be really clear that this is not about, one day, but it's actually about the ongoing movement of people into bigger and more sophisticated forms of activism.
More sophisticated forms of activism, that is the plan. The other parts of the plan, Leah, where we are pushing back against this sense that Trump has power that he doesn't have. So if you need information about how to plug into the work we're doing to prepare for election interference, you can go to indivisible.org. The other part of the plan is this fight over DHS funding. Believe them or don't believe them, doesn't matter. Now is the time to put pressure on Senate and House Democrats to unify against this regime, unify against their attempts to allow DHS to continue to run rampant. So if you need scripts, you can go to indivisible.org and find them there. We are going to be back here for What's the Plan at 3 p.m. Eastern Time next Thursday, as we always are. The podcast is available every Friday. Like, share, spread the word. We want more people in this movement. If there is not an Indivisible group near you, you looked around, you searched, you couldn't find it, congratulations. You get to found a brand new Indivisible group in the 250th year anniversary of the founding of this country, a country founded on the rejection of an authoritarian force. You get to do it yourself now. Be part of history, build community, have fun doing it, and we're going to see y'all next week. That's the plan.
That's the plan.